Okay, let's end all this with the end of Chapter 23, War and Revolution, with Section 4, the end of the war that's going to eventually lead us to another war. Moving on here, the essential questions here are: what were the key events in bringing about an end to the war? What was the intended purpose of the League of Nations? And although Woodrow Wilson came to the Paris Peace Conference with high ideals, other leaders had more practical concerns. Why do you think that was so? Maybe the fact that the fighting took place in their territory. Okay, after Russia withdrew from the war, this German general decided to make a final grand offensive to break the military stalemate on the Western Front. I didn't get my animation in here. This is Erich von Ludendorff, a picture of him there with another one of the Hindenburg here on this side. This is Ludendorff here. This is Ludendorff, and also again Hindenburg plotting strategy. And yes, it's Ludendorff from Wonder Woman. Okay, the use of hundreds of tanks and the arrival of 140,000 fresh American troops helped the Allies stop the German offensive at the Second Battle of the Marne. That is absolutely true. This is a map of that Second Battle of the Marne offensive. This is Germany launching its offensive after having gotten Russia out of the war and moving all the troops from the Eastern Front to the Western Front. Okay, which three of the following were called for in President Woodrow Wilson's proposed 14 points? One of those is self-determination of people to have their own nation. Another one is the reducing of military forces and weapons. And also then open peace agreements versus secret ones. This is Wilson's 14 points here. You see open covenants, freedom to sea, war, and peace. And the last one, the only one he gets, is a League of Nations. A League of Nations to guarantee independent and territorial integrity to great and small states alike. On November 3rd, 1918, German sailors mutinied in this northern town. This is in Kiel, Germany. This is some of the soldiers with their things. They saying they still love the Republic, but they don't believe in the war. He headed the German Democratic Republic formed by the Social Democrats in November of 1918. This is the so-called Weimar Republic. This is Friedrich Ebert, no relation as far as I know to the former movie critic. That's him. Moving on, despite the sailors' rebellion and the creation of councils of workers and soldiers forming throughout northern Germany, Wilhelm II refused to leave the country. That is false. He does leave. He advocates and leaves. And in fact, there's the New York Herald announcing that. This is his actual abdication letter. On November 11th, 1918, the new German government signed an agreement to end the fighting. That should be rather an armistice. I'll have to fix that here in post-production. This is the railroad car which they sign that agreement. Interestingly enough, Hitler finds that railroad car, has it refurbished and brought back to its things years later in World War II. And when France has to surrender earlier in the war, he makes them sign in that same railroad car. Attempts at radical revolution by the German Communist Party were crushed in Berlin and Munich, but these revolts did not leave the German middle class with deep fears of communism. That is false. They were deeply afraid of that. You would see posters like this one, Die Gefahr des Bolschewismus, the fear of Bolshevism. And you can see this is like an evil specter, death-like thing that stabbed them in the heart. He's elected Prime Minister of Great Britain in a decisive election in December of 1918, and he wanted to make the Germans pay for the war. That is David Lloyd George. Even though everyone was just following their alliances, obviously it's all Germany's fault, and they should pay for the whole thing for everyone. There he is. He's the premier of France and wanted Germany stripped of all weapons, no weapons, and to pay for the war, and a separate Rhineland, so a region between France and Germany that was separated with no military. And that's Georges Clemenceau of France. There he is. Payments to cover the cost of the war are called reparations. Germany, this is a cartoon that appeared in the New York World with them saying, hey, at the time it was saying supposed to be $55 billion, which was a lot back then. The idea was the reparations that Germany's saying, let's see you collect it. And this is the Reichstag on the night with the day they paid off the last war reparations payment in October of 2010. The big four powers at the Paris Peace Conference were France, Great Britain, the United States, and Germany. That is false. Not Germany, but rather Italy. This is Orlando from Italy talking to the British Prime Minister. There's Clemenceau, and there's Woodrow Wilson from the United States. The only one of Wilson's 14 points, as I said, was that accepted by France was the creation of the League of Nations. It's point 14 of 14. However, the Versailles peace settlement was weakened when the U.S. Senate failed to ratify the treaty, which means we never became a member of the League of Nations. There's the New York Times. Treaty defeated 49-35. The Treaty of Versailles gave Alsace and Lorraine, taken by Germany in 1871, that was in the Franco-Prussian War, back to France. That is true. This is the region that is Alsace-Lorraine here, highlighted it in the sort of reddish-orange. Which of the following is not one of the additional conditions of the Treaty of Versailles, that Germany could not rebuild its military after 20 years. That was not allowed. The land on both sides of the Rhine was demilitarized, which neither France nor Germany could have troops there. Parts of eastern Germany became part of a new Polish state. Its army was cut to 100,000 men, which is tiny at the time. Its navy cut back, and its air force completely eliminated. This is where the treaty was signed, at the Palace of Versailles. This room is referred to as the Hall of Mirrors. These archways go outside. These archways are all mirrors. The Treaty of Versailles and other separate peace treaties that led to a new map of Europe in which Germany and Russia lost territory in Eastern Europe and the Austro-Hungarian Empire disappeared. That is true. These are maps showing here is Europe in 1914 prior to the war. And you can see Germany over here, Russia. There is no Poland, Austria-Hungary. After the war, Germany loses and Poland becomes here. We see in East Prussia. We see the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia being created. We see a new Czechoslovakia, Austria, and Hungary, and Yugoslavia. Which the following is not one of the countries that France hoped would serve as barriers against Germany and communist Russia. That's Greece. If you look at the map here, they're talking about what these countries along here would serve as these types of ones, but Greece is way down here and not in between France and communist Russia. A blank is a nation officially governed by another nation on behalf of the League of Nations, but they did not own that territory. That, however, did not stop them from acting as if they did. Those are called mandates. And this is a group of mandates in Africa and the Middle East, and kind of zooming in here in the post-World War I Middle East, independent Republic of Turkey, but a French mandate of Syria, which is Syria today. We see Lebanon, which is independent, the British mandate of Palestine, which is Jordan today, and the British mandate of Mesopotamia, which is today Iraq. Iran was made independent from the Ottoman Empire. The creation of the new Eastern European countries ended the problem of ethnic minorities in countries. That is false. This is Europe again in 1914 before the war. You can see it divided up here. But we still see problems because we're going to see at the end here how divided Yugoslavia becomes at the end of the war. And Czechoslovakia splits up too. World War I was a total war that killed almost 10 million people and increased government control over their lives. That's absolutely true. This is showing some of the deaths by country and territory. This is Russia. Okay, And this is military deaths here. Then you go up. It's said that Russia lost over 3 million on this chart, but there are some groups that say leading up to the war, some of the things that they did and the revolution and the things afterwards, they may have lost in total on those years 10 million people. By the way, the flu pandemic killed more people in the year after the war than died in the entire 4 years of the war. Okay, extra credit. Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia are no longer countries. What were they split into? Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia. Czechoslovakia is the easy one, the Czech Republic and Slovakia. And Yugoslavia is a little bit tougher because Yugoslavia was split into Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Serbia, Montenegro, Kosovo, and Macedonia. Vojvodina is actually sort of a region that is basically run by Serbia from Belgrade. There you go. That's the end of World War I. And some extra credit questions, and leading to some of the problems that are going to lead us into World War II. Thanks.